My name is Sheila, and at 32 years old, I never imagined I would single-handedly tank a $60 million acquisition deal. But when the CEO's son Jeremy looked me in the eye and sneered that no one cared what I had to say, something inside me snapped. Little did he know, my carefully documented financial analysis would not only be read aloud in the final meeting, but would utterly destroy the deal his father had spent years building. Let me know where you are watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever had to deal with an entitled heir who thought their last name gave them unlimited power. I spent 8 years building my career in financial analysis. After graduating with my MBA in finance from Northwestern University, I worked my way up through 2 different companies before landing at TechVision 4 years ago. Numbers were always my sanctuary. In a world of chaos and uncertainty, financial data provided clarity and truth. My analytical mind and attention to detail had saved previous employers millions by catching discrepancies others missed. I prided myself on my thoroughness and ethical approach to financial reporting. TechVision was a mid-sized software company specializing in data management platforms. Our flagship product, DataSphere, was used by healthcare organizations and financial institutions to securely manage sensitive information. The company had been founded 15 years earlier by Michael Bennett, a self-made entrepreneur who built the business from his garage into a respectable player in the enterprise software market. When I first joined TechVision, the company culture was amazing. Michael fostered an environment of collaboration, respect, and innovation. He knew every employee by name and would regularly walk the floors to check in with teams. Our weekly all-hands meetings were informative and transparent, with Michael openly discussing challenges and victories alike. I truly loved coming to work each day. My closest colleagues quickly became like family. Rachel, our marketing director, became my lunch buddy and confidant. She was brilliant at crafting the perfect messaging for our technical products, translating complex features into benefits customers could understand. Nathaniel, our head of engineering, was quiet but wickedly smart. He would bring me into technical discussions to ensure financial implications were considered from the start. Harper, our general counsel, was meticulous and thoughtful, always willing to explain legal complexities to those of us without law degrees. Together we formed an unofficial brain trust, often meeting after hours, to discuss company strategy and ways we could contribute beyond our job descriptions. Michael encouraged these cross-functional collaborations and would sometimes join us bringing pizza and asking for our honest opinions on new initiatives. It felt like we were all building something meaningful together. Everything changed about 18 months ago when Jeremy Bennett, Michael's 26-year-old son, joined the company. Unlike his father, who worked his way up through coding and sales roles, Jeremy came directly from business school with zero practical experience. Despite this, Michael appointed him as Vice President of Business Development, a role that typically required at least a decade of industry experience. From day one, Jeremy carried himself with an arrogance that was palpable. He drove a brand new Ferrari to work, wore custom suits that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and had a habit of name-dropping celebrity friends at every opportunity. While Michael had always been humble despite his success, Jeremy acted entitled to respect he hadn't earned. Initially, I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. Perhaps he felt pressured to live up to his father's legacy. Maybe the bravado was covering insecurity. I made efforts to include him in our informal strategy sessions and offered to walk him through our financial modeling process so he could better understand the business metrics. Jeremy dismissed these overtures with barely concealed disdain. During meetings, he would scroll through his phone while I presented financial analyses. When I raised concerns about customer acquisition costs increasing while retention rates declined, he waved me off with, "The numbers will work themselves out. We need to focus on growth at all costs." It was clear he viewed finance as a necessary evil rather than a strategic function. The first major clash came during a quarterly business review. I had prepared a detailed presentation on our cash flow forecast, highlighting that we needed to either secure additional funding or reduce expenses within 6 months. Jeremy interrupted me halfway through. "This doom and gloom approach is unnecessary," he said dismissively. "Dad already has investors lined up who are excited about our potential. We need positivity, not pessimism." I tried to explain that my analysis wasn't about pessimism, but about planning only to have Michael gently suggest we move on to the next agenda item. The meeting continued, but the message was clear. Jeremy's opinion carried more weight than objective financial data. 3 months later, Jeremy announced that he had initiated acquisition talks with Global Tech, a large technology conglomerate, looking to expand their enterprise software portfolio. The potential deal was valued at $60 million, an amount that would handsomely reward investors and provide significant payouts to long-term employees with equity stakes. Michael was ecstatic. This would be the culmination of his life's work, a validation of everything he had built. He immediately positioned Jeremy as the point person for the deal, telling everyone this was Jeremy's chance to prove his value to the organization. I was assigned to lead the financial due diligence from our side, working with Jeremy to prepare all the documentation Global Tech would need to evaluate the company. On paper, it seemed like a perfect opportunity. Global Tech had the resources to take our products to the next level, and their existing customer base included many organizations that would benefit from our software. The acquisition price represented a multiple of 8 times our annual revenue, which was generous in the current market. Shareholders would receive excellent returns, and most employees would keep their jobs with better benefits and advancement opportunities. I should have been thrilled. Instead, as I began digging into the numbers to prepare for due diligence, a sense of unease started to grow in the pit of my stomach. Something wasn't adding up, and I had no idea how Jeremy would react when I brought it to his attention. The problems started emerging as I reviewed our revenue recognition practices for the due diligence documentation. TechVision had recently shifted to a subscription model, which complicated how we recorded revenue. As I cross-referenced customer contracts with our financial statements, I noticed that revenue was being recognized before it should have been. For several major enterprise clients, we were booking the entire contract value up front, even though accounting standards clearly required us to recognize it over the subscription period. This made our current year revenue look artificially inflated by about 22%. Even more concerning, many contracts included contingency clauses that allowed customers to cancel if certain implementation milestones weren't met yet. We were recognizing that revenue immediately. This wasn't just an administrative issue. It constituted improper revenue recognition that could have serious legal implications. If Global Tech discovered this during their due diligence, they might walk away from the deal entirely or dramatically reduce their offer. Worse, if the acquisition went through without disclosing these issues, Global Tech could later sue for fraud, potentially resulting in significant financial penalties and even criminal charges for executives who knowingly misrepresented the financial statements. I spent 3 days compiling a comprehensive report documenting each discrepancy, complete with citations of relevant accounting standards and estimates of the financial impact. I also drafted a plan for correcting the issues before the acquisition proceeded further. This wasn't about sabotaging the deal. It was about ensuring it was built on honest foundations. With report in hand, I requested a meeting with Jeremy. His assistant Valerie seemed hesitant when I mentioned it, concerned the Global Tech acquisition, but eventually scheduled me for 30 minutes the following afternoon. That meeting was canceled an hour before it was supposed to start. I rescheduled only to have it canceled again. This pattern repeated 4 times over 2 weeks. Jeremy is extremely busy with the acquisition, Valerie explained apologetically after the 4th cancellation. Perhaps you could just email your concerns. I considered this option, but knew that a detailed financial issue like this required discussion and context. An email could too easily be misinterpreted, or worse, ignored entirely. I needed FaceTime with Jeremy to ensure he understood the gravity of what I had discovered. After another week of failed meeting attempts, I finally cornered Jeremy in the break room. I really need 30 minutes of your time to discuss some financial concerns about the Global Tech deal, I said, trying to keep my tone professional despite my growing frustration. Jeremy sighed dramatically. Fine. Come to my office at 4 today. When I arrived at his office, Jeremy was on his phone, feet propped on his desk. He held up one finger to indicate I should wait, then proceeded to have a 15-minute conversation about his weekend plans at some exclusive resort, all while I stood there holding my binder of financial documentation. Finally, he ended his call and gestured for me to sit. Make it quick. I have dinner plans. I opened my binder and began explaining the revenue recognition issues I had discovered. I had barely gotten through the first example when Jeremy started checking his phone again. His disinterest was palpable. Look, I pressed on, this is serious. We are recognizing revenue in violation of GAAP principles when Global Tech's auditors review our books. No one cares what you say, Jeremy interrupted, looking up from his phone with cold eyes. Do you think Global Tech is buying us for our perfect bookkeeping? They want our customer base and our technology. Your job is to make the numbers look good, not to create problems where none exist. The dismissal stung, but I persisted. This isn't about making numbers look good. It's about legal compliance and honest disclosure. If we knowingly present misleading financial statements— Enough, Jeremy cut me off again. Finance people always overthink these things. Every company has accounting issues during acquisitions. The lawyers work it out in the purchase agreement. Your concerns are noted. Now, is there anything else? There was plenty else, but it was clear Jeremy wasn't listening. I gathered my materials and left his office, anger and disbelief churning in my stomach. This wasn't a minor discrepancy that could be negotiated away in legal documents. It was a fundamental misrepresentation of our financial position. I decided to go directly to Michael. As CEO, he needed to know about anything that could jeopardize the acquisition or expose the company to legal risk. I emailed his executive assistant Marion requesting an urgent meeting regarding the Global Tech deal. Marion replied almost immediately. Michael has delegated all acquisition matters to Jeremy. Please direct your concerns to him. I responded explaining that I had already spoken with Jeremy, but felt the issues warranted Michael's attention. No response. I sent a follow-up email the next day. Still nothing. When I called Marion's extension, it went straight to voicemail. I drafted a detailed email to Michael, directly outlining the revenue recognition issues and their potential impact on the acquisition. I marked it confidential and urgent, and sent it on a Friday evening, hoping he might read it over the weekend without the usual distractions. By Wednesday of the following week, I still had no response. When I passed Michael in the hallway and tried to bring it up, he smiled politely and said, Jeremy tells me you have some concerns about the books. I appreciate your thoroughness, but let's trust the process. Jeremy assures me everything is under control. It was becoming clear that Jeremy had positioned me as an unnecessary worrier, someone creating obstacles rather than solutions. I was being systematically shut out of a process where my expertise was crucial. For the first time in my career, I felt powerless to fulfill my professional obligations. The weight of knowledge about financial improprieties with no ability to address them was becoming unbearable. The situation deteriorated rapidly over the next few weeks. Jeremy began systematically undermining my position within the company. I first noticed it when Rachel mentioned a rumor that I was trying to sabotage the acquisition because I was jealous of Jeremy's role in the deal. People are saying you're worried about losing importance once Global Tech brings in their own financial team, Rachel said hesitantly during our lunch. I know it's not true, but Jeremy has been telling the department heads that your concerns are really about job security. I was stunned. My concerns had nothing to do with my position and everything to do with proper financial reporting. The fact that Jeremy was attacking my motives rather than addressing the substance of my findings spoke volumes. Then came the workload sabotage. Jeremy began assigning me urgent projects unrelated to the acquisition. First, it was a complete revamp of our internal reporting system, then a comprehensive audit of our international tax structure. These were important tasks, but certainly not priorities with an acquisition pending. The message was clear: keep me too busy to focus on the Global Tech deal. I need these by next week, Jeremy would say, dropping massive project requirements on my desk. Michael feels these are critical to our operational efficiency. Using his father as justification made it impossible for me to refuse without seeming insubordinate. Around the same time, I noticed I was being excluded from acquisition-related emails. Previously copied on all correspondence with Global Tech's financial team, I suddenly found myself out of the loop. When I asked our IT director Adam about it, he uncomfortably admitted that Jeremy had instructed him to create a separate email group for acquisition matters that specifically excluded me. He said your projects were taking priority, and he didn't want to distract you. Adam explained, not meeting my eyes. We both knew it was a lie. The final blow came when I discovered that Jeremy had created an alternate set of financial projections to present to Global Tech. Nathaniel, the engineering head, accidentally referenced them during a meeting. According to the revenue projections Jeremy shared with Global Tech last week, we should be able to double our development team after the acquisition, he mentioned casually. What projections? I asked, confused. I hadn't prepared any updated projections recently. Nathaniel looked uncomfortable. The ones showing 35% year-over-year growth for the next 3 years. Jeremy said your team put them together based on our new sales strategy. My blood ran cold. Those numbers were pure fantasy. Our historical growth rate was 12%, and our most optimistic internal projections showed at most 20% with significant additional investment. There was no scenario where 35% was achievable, especially with our existing revenue recognition issues. Later that day, I searched the shared drive for these projections and found nothing. Jeremy had apparently removed my access to the acquisition documentation folder entirely. I was being completely boxed out of the financial due diligence process. That evening, Rachel texted me, "Be careful. Jeremy told Michael you're becoming a liability to the deal. Heard him use the phrase, considering our options regarding your position." The threat of termination loomed. I had a mortgage, student loans, and not nearly enough savings to weather extended unemployment. But I also had professional ethics and legal obligations as a financial officer. The conflict between self-preservation and professional responsibility kept me awake night after night. I decided to confront Jeremy one more time. I waited until late evening when most of the office had cleared out and knocked on his door. He was still there as I expected, probably working on acquisition materials. "We need to talk about the financial projections you shared with Global Tech," I said, firmly closing his office door behind me. Jeremy leaned back in his chair. "Shouldn't you be working on that tax audit I assigned you? The projections showing 35% growth are completely unrealistic." I continued, ignoring his deflection. "And they're being presented alongside financial statements with significant revenue recognition issues. This isn't just unethical, it potentially violates securities laws." Jeremy laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You really don't understand how business works in the real world, do you? Everyone inflates projections during acquisitions. It's expected. The buyers discount them anyway." "There's a difference between optimistic projections and fantasy," I countered. "And there's certainly a difference between aggressive accounting and improper revenue recognition." Jeremy's expression hardened. "You're taking this all far too seriously. This is a big boy game, Sheila. No one cares about your excessive caution. The deal will close, everyone will make money, and all these little details you're obsessing over will be forgotten." His condescension made my blood boil. These little details could constitute fraud. As a financial officer, I have a legal obligation to ensure accurate reporting. "Your obligation," Jeremy said, standing up to emphasize his height advantage over me, "is to this company and its shareholders. This deal maximizes their value. Everything else is just noise." He walked to his door and opened it. "We're done here. And Sheila, I'd start updating your resume if I were you." The threat was unmistakable. I left his office shaking with a mixture of anger and fear. That night I barely slept. I cycled through all my options, each seeming worse than the last. If I continued pushing, I'd likely lose my job. If I kept quiet, I could be legally complicit in financial misrepresentation. If I went outside the company to regulators, I might be protected as a whistleblower, but I'd be permanently blacklisted in the industry. The stress was taking a physical toll. I developed persistent headaches and stomach problems. My normally meticulous appearance began to suffer as exhaustion set in. Friends outside work commented on how tired I looked, how I seemed distant and preoccupied. "You need to decide if this hill is worth dying on," my friend Taylor advised over coffee one weekend. "Is your career worth this, principal?" The question haunted me. Was I overreacting? Was this really how acquisitions worked? With everyone winking at financial irregularities, as Jeremy suggested? Had my strict adherence to accounting principles made me naive about business realities? Deep down, I knew the answer. Numbers don't lie even when people do. And I had built my entire professional identity on the integrity of financial reporting. If I abandoned that now, what would be left? The final preparation meeting before Global Tech's due diligence team arrived was scheduled for a Monday morning. To my surprise, I received a calendar invitation. Perhaps Michael had finally recognized the need for proper financial representation, or more likely Jeremy wanted me there to control what I might say. The conference room was packed with TechVision's senior leadership team. Michael sat at the head of the table looking energized and younger than his 57 years. The acquisition was his crowning achievement, the validation of his entrepreneurial journey. Jeremy sat at his right hand, perfectly groomed in an expensive suit, exuding confidence. I took a seat toward the middle of the table, nodding to Rachel and Nathaniel, who gave me small smiles of encouragement. Harper, our general counsel, sat opposite me, her expression unreadable. Michael began the meeting with characteristic enthusiasm. This is the culmination of 15 years of hard work, everyone. Global Tech's full team arrives tomorrow for the final review. If all goes well, we sign preliminary agreements by Friday and announce next week. Jeremy has led this process brilliantly, so I'll let him walk us through the final preparations. Jeremy stood and launched into a polished presentation about the acquisition timeline, integration plans, and financial highlights. When he got to the financial projections, my stomach clenched. The slides showed the same fabricated growth curves Nathaniel had mentioned, presenting them as conservative estimates. As you can see, Jeremy said smoothly, our conservative financial model shows 35% year-over-year growth for the next 3 fiscal years, resulting in a nearly 300% valuation increase by year 4. I couldn't stay silent. Excuse me, I interrupted, but those projections are significantly more aggressive than any we've developed in the finance department. Our historical growth has been 12% annually. What assumptions are these new projections based on? The room went silent. Jeremy's smile froze. These projections incorporate our new sales strategy and the expanded market access we'll gain through Global Tech's distribution channels, he replied smoothly. The finance team provided the baseline, and we adjusted for acquisition synergies. This was a blatant lie. My team had provided no such baseline, and 35% growth couldn't be justified by synergies alone. I opened my mouth to say exactly that when Michael interrupted. I think we can discuss modeling assumptions later, he said firmly. Let's stay focused on the big picture today. Jeremy continued his presentation occasionally, glancing at me with what seemed like triumph in his eyes. When he concluded, he asked if there were any questions. I raised my hand again. I'm concerned about the revenue recognition practices we'll be presenting to Global Tech's auditors. There are significant discrepancies in how we're recording subscription revenue that don't align with accounting standards. Jeremy's jaw tightened. Those technical details have been reviewed by our external accountants, he replied dismissively. Everything is in order. Another lie. Our external accountants had not conducted a specific review of our revenue recognition. They had only performed their standard annual audit, which had not caught these particular issues. I haven't seen any documentation of that review, I persisted, given that improper revenue recognition could constitute. Sheila Michael cut in sharply. This isn't the time or place. Jeremy has assured me all financial matters are in order. Let's move forward. Jeremy looked at me with barely concealed contempt and whispered just loud enough for me to hear, I told you no one cares. The meeting continued, but I barely heard the remaining discussion. Blood pounded in my ears as anger and humiliation fought for dominance. I had been publicly dismissed, my professional expertise disregarded in favor of Jeremy's hollow assurances. After the meeting, Michael asked me to stay behind. My heart raced, wondering if this was finally my chance to make him understand the severity of the situation. But as the room cleared, I realized Jeremy was staying too, standing behind his father with arms crossed. Sheila Michael began his tone, disappointingly stern. I value your contributions to this company, but your behavior today was inappropriate. Jeremy has been working tirelessly on this deal, and these last-minute objections are disruptive. Michael, the issues I'm raising aren't last minute, I tried to explain. I've been attempting to address them for weeks. The revenue recognition problems are significant, and the growth projections being presented are simply not achievable. Michael's expression hardened. Every acquisition involves optimistic projections. Global Tech's team will make their own assessments. As for accounting technicalities, those can be addressed during integration. These aren't technicalities, I insisted. We're recognizing revenue before it's earned. That's a fundamental misrepresentation of our financial position. Enough, Michael said firmly. Jeremy has assured me that everything is being handled appropriately. I need to know if you're going to be a team player here, Sheila. This acquisition is too important to the company, to all our employees and shareholders, to be derailed by accounting purism. Jeremy smirked behind his father, secure in his victory. I felt trapped, cornered by the impossible choice between my professional integrity and my career. So I'm expected to remain silent about financial misrepresentation, I asked quietly. You're expected to support this company's best interests, Michael replied. Jeremy will handle any questions from Global Tech's financial team. I need your assurance that you won't create problems during their visit. The implication was clear: get on board or get out. I looked between father and son, one misguided by blind trust, the other corrupted by entitlement and ambition. I understand, I said finally, the words tasting bitter. As I turned to leave, Jeremy's smug expression told me everything. He believed he had won, that I would choose self-preservation over principle. And maybe he was right. The thought of unemployment, of explaining a termination in future job interviews, was terrifying. But as I walked back to my office, something shifted inside me. The anger and fear began to crystallize into resolve. I might lose my job, but I couldn't lose my integrity. It was the one thing that was truly mine, that couldn't be taken away unless I surrendered it voluntarily. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I reviewed my employment contract, the company's code of conduct, and securities regulations regarding financial disclosure during acquisitions. I researched whistleblower protections and the legal obligations of financial officers. By morning, I knew what I had to do. At 5:30 the next morning, I arrived at the office. The building was deserted, giving me the privacy I needed. I settled at my desk and began drafting the most important email of my career. I started with a clear professional introduction stating my position and responsibilities at TechVision. Then I methodically documented every financial irregularity I had discovered, with specific examples, contract numbers, and calculations, showing the impact on our reported revenue. I included screenshots of the actual financial records alongside the standards they violated. Next, I addressed the growth projections, contrasting our historical performance with the fabricated forecast being presented to Global Tech. I included our actual internal projections developed by my team, showing realistic growth scenarios. I concluded with a simple statement. As a financial officer of TechVision, I am ethically and legally obligated to disclose these discrepancies. My previous attempts to address these issues internally have been ignored or suppressed. I am providing this information to ensure all parties can make informed decisions based on accurate financial data. I reviewed the email 3 times, ensuring every claim was factual and supported by evidence. Then I added the recipients: Michael Bennett, Jeremy Bennett, our entire executive team, and our board of directors. After a moment's hesitation, I also added Bradford Miller, Global Tech's head of due diligence, copying the address from a previous correspondence. My finger hovered over the send button. Once I did this, there was no going back. My career at TechVision would almost certainly be over. But if I didn't do it, I would be complicit in what amounted to financial fraud. I took a deep breath and clicked send. For about 20 minutes, nothing happened. I sat at my desk, alternating between numbness and nauseating anxiety. Then my phone rang. Jeremy's name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. It immediately rang again, and again. After the 4th call, a text message appeared. You had better call me back right now if you want any chance of keeping your job. What you just did violates your NDA and could be grounds for legal action against you personally. I turned off my phone. If I was going to be fired or sued, I'd rather it happen in person than over the phone. At 8:15, as people began filtering into the office, my desk phone rang. It was Harper, our general counsel. Sheila, she said quietly. Michael has called an emergency meeting in the executive conference room. You should come now. Am I being fired? I asked bluntly. There was a pause. I don't know, Harper replied, but I should tell you that what you did was legally protected. As a financial officer, you have a duty to report material misstatements. Jeremy may not understand that, but I do. Whatever happens, you did the right thing. Her words gave me courage. I straightened my blazer, grabbed my laptop, and walked to the conference room with my head high. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Michael sat at the head of the table, looking like he had aged 10 years overnight. Jeremy paced along the windows, his face flushed with anger. Our CFO, Lawrence, studied some papers, intently avoiding eye contact with everyone. Harper sat with a legal pad, her expression professionally neutral. Sit down, Sheila, Michael said wearily. I took a seat, keeping my expression composed, despite my racing heart. Do you understand what you've done? Jeremy exploded before his father could continue. You've potentially destroyed this entire deal. Years of work, millions in value, all because you couldn't be a team player for 1 week. Jeremy, Michael warned, let me handle this. He turned to me. Sheila, this email, the timing of it. Couldn't you have raised these concerns earlier through proper channels? I tried, I said simply. For weeks I tried to discuss these issues with Jeremy and with you. My emails went unanswered. My meetings were canceled. I was removed from acquisition-related communications. What choice did I have? You always have a choice, Jeremy spat. You chose to sabotage this company. I chose to uphold financial integrity, I countered. The issues I outlined aren't minor discrepancies. They're serious misrepresentations that could expose this company to lawsuits and regulatory penalties. Lawrence, our CFO, finally looked up. She's right about the revenue recognition issues, he admitted reluctantly. I noticed some of the same problems, but thought we could clean them up post-acquisition. Jeremy whirled on him. You're taking her side now, after she copied Global Tech on internal communications. I'm not taking sides, Lawrence replied. I'm acknowledging financial facts. Harper cleared her throat. From a legal perspective, Sheila's disclosure is protected under whistleblower statutes and her fiduciary duty as a financial officer. Any retaliatory action would expose the company to additional liability. Jeremy's face reddened further. So she gets to torpedo the biggest deal in company history and face no consequences. The consequences, I said quietly, should be for those who misrepresented our financial position, not for those who reported it accurately. The room fell silent. Michael looked defeated, caught between his son and the truth. Before anyone could speak again, there was a knock at the door. Marion, Michael's assistant, poked her head in. The Global Tech team has arrived. They're waiting in the main conference room. Michael took a deep breath. We'll continue this discussion later. For now, we need to face Global Tech and see if there's anything left to salvage. He looked directly at me. Sheila, since your email is now central to this situation, you'll join us in the meeting. As we walked to the main conference room, Jeremy hissed in my ear. This isn't over. When this deal falls apart, I will personally ensure you never work in finance again. I didn't respond. The time for threats and intimidation was past. The Global Tech contingent was larger than expected. Besides their usual negotiation team, they had brought additional legal counsel, financial analysts, and auditors. Victor Sullivan, Global Tech's CEO, sat at the center of their side of the table, his expression unreadable. Michael put on a brave face as he greeted everyone. Thank you all for coming. We're excited to move forward with what we believe will be a beneficial partnership for both companies. Victor nodded politely, but didn't return Michael's enthusiasm. Before we proceed, I think we need to address the email we received this morning from your senior financial analyst. He gestured to Bradford Miller, his due diligence lead. Bradford, a serious man with salt and pepper hair and wire-rimmed glasses, opened a folder and cleared his throat. I'd like to reference an email sent at 5:43 this morning from Sheila Walker, senior financial analyst at TechVision. My heart pounded as Bradford began reading my email verbatim to the room. Each paragraph landed like a hammer blow, the detailed evidence of financial misrepresentation laid bare before both companies' leadership. Jeremy stared daggers at me, while Michael seemed to physically shrink in his chair. When Bradford finished reading, the room fell completely silent. Victor Sullivan studied Michael and Jeremy for a long moment, his expression contemplative. Then, without speaking, he wrote something on a notepad, tore off the page, and slid it to the lawyer beside him. The lawyer read the note, his eyebrows rising slightly. He leaned over and whispered to Victor, just loud enough for those of us nearest to hear, "Oh, this kills the escrow." Victor nodded and straightened in his chair. Michael, in light of this information, we'll need to reassess our position. The financial discrepancies outlined by Ms. Walker represent material differences from what was previously presented to us. These are just technical accounting issues, Jeremy interjected desperately. Every company has them during acquisitions. They can be adjusted during integration. Victor's gaze shifted to Jeremy, his expression cooling further. Mr. Bennett, improper revenue recognition isn't a technical issue. It's a fundamental misrepresentation of your company's financial health. And projections showing 35% growth when your historical performance shows 12% isn't optimism, it's fiction. Michael attempted damage control. Victor, I assure you we can address these concerns. Perhaps we could take a short break, and our teams can work through each point, Sheila raised. Bradford Miller shook his head. We've already done our analysis based on the information Ms. Walker provided. The revenue adjustments alone would reduce TechVision's trailing 12 months revenue by approximately 22%. That significantly impacts our valuation model. Victor nodded in agreement. Michael, we're still interested in acquiring TechVision. The strategic fit remains compelling. However, we'll need to revise our offer. By how much? Michael asked, his voice strained. Our preliminary reassessment would value the company at approximately $18 million, rather than the 60 million previously discussed, Victor replied evenly. Additionally, we would require a much larger escrow holdback to account for potential liabilities, with extended release provisions tied to financial verification milestones. The room seemed to spin around me. I had expected my email to impact the deal, but I hadn't anticipated such a dramatic reduction in the acquisition price. 18 million was less than a third of the original offer. Jeremy exploded. This is extortion. You're using one disgruntled employee's claims to steal our company. Victor remained unruffled. Your employee's claims are supported by evidence we've now verified independently. If anything, Miss Walker has saved both our companies from a situation that could have resulted in litigation after closing. He turned to address me directly. Your professional integrity is commendable. Jeremy turned to his father, gesturing frantically. Don't let them do this, Dad. They're using this as a negotiating tactic. Michael didn't respond to his son. Instead, he asked in a hollow voice, Could we have some time to discuss this privately? Of course, Victor replied. We'll reconvene tomorrow morning. However, I should be clear that our revised offer is firm. As the Global Tech team gathered their materials to leave, Bradford Miller approached me. Miss Walker, if you have time later, I'd like to discuss a few more details from your analysis. He discreetly slipped me his business card, our fingers briefly touching in what felt like a gesture of solidarity. After Global Tech departed, Michael slumped in his chair looking utterly defeated. The room remained silent until Jeremy slammed his fist on the table. This is your fault, he said, pointing at me. You've destroyed everything my father built because you couldn't keep your mouth shut. Jeremy, enough, Michael said tiredly. We need to discuss our options rationally. What options? Jeremy demanded. They're offering pennies on the dollar now. Harper interjected calmly. We should consider whether Global Tech's revised valuation actually reflects the company's true financial position once the accounting issues are corrected. Lawrence nodded in agreement. Based on Sheila's analysis, their new offer is actually in line with industry multiples for our corrected revenue figures. Jeremy looked incredulous. So you're all just accepting this, rolling over and letting them rob us blind? No one is robbing us, Michael said, finally meeting his son's gaze. They're responding to accurate information about our company, information that should have been provided from the beginning. He turned to me. Sheila, you're excused for now. We'll continue this discussion internally. As I stood to leave, Jeremy's parting shot followed me to the door. Your career is over. I promise you that. I walked back to my office on shaky legs, a mixture of vindication and dread swirling inside me. I had stood up for what was right, but at what cost? The acquisition was in jeopardy. Jobs might be lost, and I had made a powerful enemy in Jeremy Bennett. As I sat at my desk staring at my blank computer screen, I wondered if integrity was worth the price I might have to pay. The next few days passed in a blur of emergency meetings and tense conversations. The office atmosphere was charged with uncertainty, as rumors spread about the troubled acquisition. Some colleagues avoided me in the hallways, while others gave me subtle nods of respect. I had become simultaneously a pariah and a folk hero, depending on who you asked. The board of directors called an emergency session the day after the Global Tech meeting. To my surprise, I was summoned to present my findings directly to them. Standing before the 12 board members, including several influential investors, was intimidating but liberating. For the first time, I could present the full financial picture without Jeremy's interference. The issues I discovered aren't isolated incidents, I explained, walking them through detailed slides. They represent a systematic pattern of aggressive revenue recognition that violates accounting standards. Board members asked sharp, informed questions. Unlike Michael, they didn't dismiss my concerns or make excuses. They were focused on understanding the full extent of the problem. Why wasn't this caught in our annual audit? Asked Diana, a board member with a background in venture capital. The discrepancies became more pronounced in the last 2 quarters, I explained. Additionally, our external auditors weren't specifically reviewing revenue recognition methodology during their last engagement. After my presentation, the board thanked me and asked me to leave so they could deliberate. As I gathered my materials, Diana approached me. That took courage, she said quietly. Whatever happens next, know that you did your job with integrity. The board's decision came swiftly. They announced an independent forensic audit of TechVision's financial statements going back 3 years. The accounting firm KPMG was engaged to conduct a comprehensive review, with results expected within 3 weeks. Meanwhile, Jeremy was placed on administrative leave, pending the investigation results. His company email was suspended, and he was asked to work from home. The news rippled through the office like a shockwave. The untouchable heir apparent had finally faced consequences. Michael remained CEO, but was subject to increased board oversight. He seemed subdued in the days following the energetic entrepreneur replaced by a weary executive facing the potential collapse of his legacy. As for me, I was neither celebrated nor punished officially. I continued my work focusing on supporting the forensic auditors with any information they needed. The uncertainty of my future at TechVision hung over me like a cloud, but I found unexpected clarity in having acted according to my principles. The forensic audit results were even worse than I had anticipated. Beyond the revenue recognition issues I had identified, the auditors discovered several other financial irregularities. Expense accounts had been manipulated to improve EBITDA metrics. Customer churn rates were underreported by reclassifying cancellations. Development costs that should have been expensed were improperly capitalized. The full report painted a picture not of occasional errors, but of systematic financial manipulation designed to make the company appear more profitable and faster growing than it actually was. The board called another emergency meeting. This time the outcomes were decisive. Jeremy was terminated immediately. Michael was asked to step down as CEO, though he was allowed to retain the position of chairman, largely a ceremonial role with limited operational authority. Most surprisingly, I was called into a private meeting with the board's executive committee. "We've created a new position," Diana explained. "Chief Compliance Officer responsible for ensuring financial accuracy and regulatory compliance. We'd like to offer you the role." The promotion came with a significant salary increase and a seat at the executive leadership table. It was a stunning validation of my professional judgment and ethical stance. "Why me?" I asked. "I'm the one who threw a wrench in your acquisition." "You're the one who prevented us from making a catastrophic mistake," Diana corrected. "Had this deal gone through with these issues undisclosed, the resulting lawsuits could have bankrupted the company. You saved TechVision even if it doesn't feel that way right now." We hired a new CEO from outside the company, Amanda Richardson, a seasoned technology executive with a reputation for operational excellence and integrity. Under her leadership, we began the painstaking process of correcting our financial statements and rebuilding our business practices. The company culture transformed gradually. Transparency became a core value, with Amanda instituting open book management practices, where financial results were shared with all employees quarterly, along with education about how to interpret the numbers. Relationships with colleagues evolved too. Rachel apologized for not supporting me more publicly. "I was scared for my job," she admitted over coffee. "But watching you stand up for what's right made me realize how much I've compromised over the years." Nathaniel became an unexpected ally, collaborating with my team to develop better tracking of engineering deliverables against contract milestones, ensuring revenue was recognized appropriately. Harper, who had quietly supported me from the beginning, became a close friend and mentor as we worked together to strengthen the company's ethical guidelines and compliance procedures. Even my relationship with Michael experienced an unexpected evolution. About 3 months after the failed acquisition, he asked me to meet him for coffee. "I owe you an apology," he said as we sat in a quiet corner of a local cafe. "I was so focused on the deal that I lost sight of what really matters in business: honesty and integrity." His face showed the strain of recent months, new lines around his eyes and mouth testifying to sleepless nights and difficult reckonings. "I should have listened to you from the beginning." "What about Jeremy?" I asked cautiously. Michael sighed heavily. "That's my greatest failure. I raised him to believe his last name, entitled him to success without earning it. I gave him authority, without requiring accountability." He looked out the window, his expression distant. "He's working for a small software firm in Austin now, starting at the bottom, which is what he should have done here." "I'm sorry things turned out this way," I said, and meant it. Despite everything, I had always respected Michael's entrepreneurial journey. "Don't be," he replied, meeting my gaze directly. "You did exactly what I should have hired you to do: protect the company's financial integrity. It was painful, but necessary. TechVision will be stronger for it in the long run." As the months passed, the company stabilized under Amanda's leadership. We implemented proper accounting practices, rebuilt relationships with customers, and focused on sustainable growth rather than inflated metrics. 6 months after the failed Global Tech acquisition, Bradford Miller reached out to me again. He invited me to speak on a panel about financial ethics at an industry conference. After the panel over drinks, he shared something surprising. "You should know that Global Tech had already identified most of the issues you raised in your email," he confessed. "Our preliminary due diligence had flagged the revenue recognition problems and the unrealistic projections." "Then why did you react so strongly in the meeting?" I asked, confused. Bradford smiled. "Your email gave us the leverage we needed. It's one thing for us to discover problems during due diligence. It's another entirely when a senior financial analyst at the target company formally documents them. Your email was the smoking gun that allowed us to dramatically reduce our offer without appearing predatory." I wasn't sure how to feel about this revelation. Had I been manipulated, or had I simply provided Global Tech with the ammunition they needed to negotiate fairly, based on TechVision's actual value? "Don't misunderstand," Bradford continued, noting my expression. "Your actions were completely appropriate and necessary. In fact," he hesitated, "Global Tech has been impressed with your integrity and financial acumen. We have an opening for a director of financial analysis that I think you'd be perfect for." The job offer was tempting. Global Tech was a Fortune 500 company, with resources and opportunities far beyond TechVision's scale. The compensation package Bradford outlined was generous, including significant equity. But as I considered the offer over the following weeks, I realized that my work at TechVision wasn't finished. The company was in the midst of a transformation that I had helped initiate. There was something deeply satisfying about seeing that change through, about building something honest and sustainable from the ashes of what had nearly been a disaster. I declined Global Tech's offer, politely explaining that I was committed to TechVision's rebuilding process. Bradford understood, though he made it clear the door remained open if I ever changed my mind. A year after my fateful email, TechVision had transformed into a different company. Our revenue was lower on paper than the inflated figures of the past, but it was real, sustainable, and growing steadily. Employee satisfaction scores had improved dramatically under Amanda's leadership. We had even begun exploring acquisition possibilities again, though this time with absolute transparency about our finances. In a fitting epilogue, Jeremy's replacement as VP of Business Development, Sophia, brought in a new potential acquirer, a mid-sized enterprise software company looking to expand their data management capabilities. The initial offer was $25 million less than half of Global Tech's original number, but a fair valuation based on our actual financial position. When their due diligence team arrived, I provided them with comprehensive, accurate financial information from the start. Their CFO commented that it was the most transparent acquisition process he had ever experienced. The deal closed successfully 6 weeks later. While the financial outcome was more modest than the fantasy Jeremy had pursued, it provided a solid return for investors and security for employees. Most importantly, it was built on a foundation of truth rather than deception. Looking back on that tumultuous year, I can hardly believe how much has changed. The acquisition by InnoSystems was finalized 3 months ago, bringing stability and new opportunities to TechVision. Most employees, including me, retained our positions now with better benefits and more resources at our disposal. The financial terms were fair: $25 million, with 15% held in escrow for 1 year. Because we had been completely transparent during due diligence, the escrow period was shorter and the conditions less stringent than is typical in such deals. Honesty had literally paid dividends. Michael Bennett retired officially after the acquisition closed, selling his remaining shares and stepping away from business entirely. At his retirement party, he pulled me aside and said something I'll never forget. "You saved this company from my blindness and my son's ambition." What seemed like betrayal was actually the truest loyalty. Jeremy has remained distant from TechVision and his father. According to industry gossip, he struggled to find his footing in companies where his last name doesn't automatically confer authority. I genuinely hope he finds his way to success through merit, rather than entitlement, though that journey will be entirely his to make. Bradford Miller and I have maintained a professional friendship. We occasionally meet at industry events, where he continues to half-jokingly recruit me to Global Tech. Their acquisition strategy shifted after our deal fell through, focusing on smaller, more thoroughly vetted targets. Bradford told me they now include specific questions about revenue recognition practices in their initial due diligence, informally dubbed the Sheila check, within their team. My own career has flourished in ways I never expected. After the acquisition, InnoSystems expanded my role to oversee financial compliance across their entire portfolio of companies. I now lead a team of 15 analysts who ensure financial reporting integrity throughout the organization. More gratifying than the professional advancement has been the personal growth. Standing up for what was right despite enormous pressure to remain silent showed me a strength I didn't know I possessed. There were moments during that ordeal when I was terrified, when the weight of potential consequences nearly broke my resolve. But, having survived that test of character, I now face challenges with a confidence that comes from knowing I can choose principle over expediency, even when the cost is high. The most profound lesson I've learned is that integrity isn't just a personal virtue, it's a business asset. The companies that survive and thrive in the long term are those built on honest foundations. Financial tricks and accounting manipulations might create temporary illusions of success, but they inevitably collapse, often taking good people down with them. I've also learned about the quiet courage of others. Rachel, Nathaniel Harper, and many colleagues who seemed to stand on the sidelines were fighting their own internal battles between self-preservation and principle. Some found their voices after I found mine. Others never spoke publicly but supported the truth in subtle ways. I've become less quick to judge those who don't immediately stand with the truth-teller, understanding now how complex those moments of ethical choice can be. Perhaps most importantly, I've learned that speaking truth to power isn't always career suicide. Yes, there are organizations where messengers get shot where integrity is punished rather than rewarded. But there are also places where honesty is recognized for the value it brings, where leaders are secure enough to hear uncomfortable truths. The voice that speaks uncomfortable truth may not be welcomed in the moment, but it's often the one that prevents disaster. In the deafening chorus of yes-men and corporate politics, sometimes the lone voice saying this isn't right is the only one that truly matters. If you find yourself in a situation where your professional knowledge and ethics collide with organizational pressure, remember that your integrity is the one thing no one can take from you. You can only surrender it voluntarily. And while standing for truth may feel lonely in the moment, you'll often discover unexpected allies and opportunities on the other side of that difficult choice. Have you ever had to make a difficult ethical choice in your career? Did you speak up or stay silent? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if you found value in my experience, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who might be facing their own moment of truth in their professional life. Remember, sometimes the hardest decisions lead to the most meaningful growth. Thank you for listening to my story.